My son and his wife left for a cruise, trusting me to watch my 8-year-old grandson, a child who had never spoken a word since birth. The moment the front door clicked shut, he stopped rocking, lifted his head, and looked straight at me. Then, in a clear, steady voice, he whispered, "Grandma, don't drink the tea Mom made for you." My blood turned cold. I'm glad you're here. Stay with me until the end of this story and comment the city you're watching from so I can see how far it travels. Because I never imagined that babysitting my grandson for a week would turn my entire world upside down. At 66, I believed surprises were behind me. I had lived a full life, learned how to manage grief, and settled into quiet routines. Watching Damien felt familiar, safe. Damien had been labeled nonverbal since birth. Doctors insisted he couldn't speak or understand much beyond simple routines. Over the years, I learned to communicate with him through gestures, expressions, and patience. Still, there was always that ache, wondering what thoughts lived behind his thoughtful brown eyes. The morning Dean and Nyla left, something felt tense. Dean asked, more than once, if I was sure I could manage. Nyla handed me a small box of tea packets and reminded me how important Damien's routine was. "Just 1 cup a day," she said. "It'll help you relax." I thanked her, never questioning her concern. After they drove away, the house felt quieter, lighter. Damien and I spent the morning peacefully. He lined up his toys with careful precision while I worked on a puzzle. Near lunchtime, I decided to make the tea Nyla had prepared. The scent was strange, floral but sharp, almost medicinal. As the kettle boiled, I heard footsteps behind me. Then came the impossible. "Grandma, please don't drink that." I turned, heart racing. He stood in the doorway, eyes focused, voice steady. "She put something in it," he whispered. In that moment, I realized 2 terrifying truths at once. My grandson could speak, and someone had been lying to me for a very long time. What Damien revealed next explained why he stayed silent for 8 years and why this week was never meant to end safely. Before we continue, make sure you're subscribed to the channel. Stories like this take unexpected turns, and you won't want to miss what happens next. After Damien spoke those words, neither of us moved. I stared at him, my heart pounding so loudly I was sure he could hear it. For 8 years, doctors, therapists, everyone had told us he couldn't speak. Yet here he was, standing in my kitchen, warning me like an adult would. "Damien," I said carefully, my voice shaking, "did you just talk to me?" He nodded. "I'm sorry, Grandma," he whispered. "I didn't want to scare you, but the tea isn't safe." My knees nearly gave out. I sank into a chair, gripping the edge of the table to steady myself. "All this time," I said softly, "you could talk?" "Yes," he said, "but I wasn't allowed to." The way he said it, calm, practiced, sent a chill through me. I pulled him close, feeling his small body tremble. "Who told you that you weren't allowed to?" He hesitated, eyes darting toward the hallway as if someone might be listening, even though the house was empty. "Mom," he said quietly. "She said if I ever talked, bad things would happen." My stomach twisted. What kind of bad things? "She said you'd get hurt or that I'd be sent away where no one could see me again." I felt something inside me break. For years, I had watched my daughter-in-law play the role of devoted mother, attending appointments, managing routines, speaking for Damien whenever anyone asked questions. I had never imagined she was also silencing him with fear. "And the tea?" I asked gently. "What's wrong with it?" Damien looked down at his hands. "She puts medicine in it, the kind that makes you sleepy and confused." The room seemed to tilt. "That's why you've been forgetting things," he continued. "She said people would think it's normal because you're old." Old. I swallowed hard, memories flooding back. How tired I had been lately, how foggy my thoughts had felt, how Dean and Nyla had started talking about my memory like it was already failing. "How long has this been happening?" I asked. "A long time," Damien said. "She makes it stronger sometimes, especially before they left." I glanced at the shattered mug on the floor, realizing just how close I'd come. "Why did you tell me now?" I asked. "Because they're gone," he said simply, "and because she said this week was important." Important. The word echoed in my head as understanding began to form. This wasn't random. It wasn't accidental. Someone had planned this. I wiped my hands on my cardigan, forcing myself to stay calm. "Listen to me, sweetheart. You did the right thing. You saved me." His eyes filled with tears. "I was scared you wouldn't believe me." I cupped his face gently. "I believe you, and we're going to be very careful from now on." He nodded, suddenly older than any child should ever be. As I cleaned up the broken mug, one thought burned in my mind. If Damien hadn't spoken, this story might have ended very differently. But what Damien told me next about how long this had been planned made me realize the danger was far from over. Let me ask you something. What would you do if a child finally trusted you with a secret that could change everything? Tell me in the comments, do you think you would believe them right away? After Damien told me about the tea, we sat at the kitchen table in complete silence for a long moment. Not the familiar, gentle silence I was used to with him, but a heavy one, filled with truth. "You understand everything, don't you?" I asked quietly. He nodded. "I always have." That hurt more than I expected. All those years I'd spoken slowly around him, simplified my words, let others talk over him as if he weren't even in the room. And all that time, he'd been listening, learning, remembering. "She makes me pretend," Damien continued. "When doctors come or when people visit, I have to act like I don't understand. If I don't, she gets angry." "What happens when she gets angry?" I asked. He hesitated. "She doesn't hit me, but she says things, bad things. She tells me I'll be taken away or that you'll get sick." My hands clenched in my lap. Fear was one thing, but control through threats, that was something far darker. "That's why you never talked," I said. He nodded again. "I was protecting you." I felt tears sting my eyes. My 8-year-old grandson protecting me? "How did you learn to read?" I asked. "TV," he said simply, "closed captions, and I listen when adults talk. They forget I'm there." Of course they did. They saw what they wanted to see. "What else do you know?" I asked gently. He lowered his voice even though we were alone. "Mom keeps notes. She writes things down about you, about how tired you look, about when you forget things." My heart dropped. "She says it helps her keep track," he added, "but I think it's for something else." I thought back to the last 2 years, how often Nyla had commented on my memory, how Dean had started asking if I was managing okay on my own, how the word confused had crept into conversations like a diagnosis no one asked for. "Damien," I said carefully, "do you know what she wants?" He looked straight at me. "She wants you gone." The words were quiet, calm, certain. "She said if you weren't here, everything would be easier. The house, the money, Dad wouldn't argue anymore. I felt something cold settle in my chest. This wasn't just about tea. This wasn't just about control. It was about erasing me. I stood up slowly, pacing the kitchen, my thoughts racing. Every odd comment, every concerned look, every cup of tea I'd trusted without question. All pieces of the same plan. "Grandma," Damien said softly, "she thinks this week will fix everything." I stopped moving. "What do you mean?" "She made the tea stronger," he said. "She said it had to work while they were gone." The danger wasn't over. It was already in motion. I knelt in front of him and took his hands. "From now on, we don't touch anything she made. Nothing. Do you understand?" He nodded. And in that moment, I realized something terrifying and powerful at the same time. The child everyone thought couldn't speak was the only one who knew the truth. But the next thing Damien showed me, something his mother never expected me to see, proved this plan had been building for years. Before we continue, let me ask you this. If you discovered someone close to you was secretly planning your downfall, what would you do first? Confront them or gather proof? Answer in the comments. I want to know what you would have done in my place. After Damien told me the tea had been made stronger, I barely slept that night. Every sound in the house felt louder. Every shadow seemed heavier. I kept replaying the past 2 years in my head. Every moment I'd brushed off my exhaustion. Every time I'd blamed my forgetfulness on age. In the morning, Damien asked me to follow him upstairs. "There's something I need to show you," he said, "but we have to be careful." He led me into the small bedroom he used when visiting me. Everything looked ordinary, his bed, his toys, his folded clothes. Then he walked to the dresser and pulled out a soft blanket from the bottom drawer. Hidden beneath it was a thin folder. My hands started shaking the moment I touched it. "She thinks I can't read," Damien said. "That's why she hid it here." Inside were printed articles, medical websites, highlighted passages, handwritten notes in neat, precise writing I instantly recognized as Nyla's. Signs of cognitive decline in elderly patients, medication interactions in seniors, when aging parents require alternative care. The margins were filled with notes, dates, observations. More confusion this week. Appears compliant. Doctors would believe this is normal. My chest tightened as I flipped through the pages. This wasn't worry. This was documentation. "She writes things down every night," Damien said quietly, "about how you act, what you forget." At the back of the folder was a list. My name was written at the top. Below it, dates going back nearly 2 years, notes about my sleep, my memory, my behavior. I had never been losing myself. Someone had been tracking my decline like a project. I sat on the edge of the bed, struggling to breathe. "She planned this," I whispered. Damien nodded. "She said people believe paperwork more than people." That sentence alone told me everything. "She also keeps pills. She crushes them and mixes them into the tea packets." My stomach turned. "How do you know?" I asked. "He saw her," he said. "She thought I was asleep." That's when the fear turned into resolve. This wasn't just about surviving the week anymore. This was about stopping her for good. I carefully put everything back exactly where it was. If Nyla suspected we knew, she might move faster. "From now on," I told Damien, "we don't act any different. You stay quiet when others are around. I'll pretend I'm tired and confused if I have to." He nodded without hesitation. "I've been pretending my whole life." That broke my heart, but it also made one thing very clear. We weren't powerless, we were just underestimated. And what I decided to do next, before my son and his wife returned, could have saved my life or ended everything if it failed. Before we go any further, make sure you're subscribed. What happens next is where everything shifts, and missing even one part would change how this story makes sense. By the third morning, something felt different, clearer. For the first time in months, maybe years, my head felt sharp. The constant heaviness behind my eyes was gone. The fog that had followed me around like a shadow had lifted. And that terrified me, because it meant Damien was right. Whatever Nyla had been putting in that tea had been affecting me for a long time. "Grandma," Damien said quietly as we ate breakfast, "you're acting like you used to." I looked at him. "How so?" "You don't forget words anymore," he said, "and you don't get confused when you stand up." That confirmation sent a chill through me. This wasn't imagined. This wasn't age. This was poisoning. I forced myself to take a breath and think logically. Panic wouldn't help us. We needed a plan, one that kept Damien safe and made sure the truth couldn't be dismissed. "She's going to call today," Damien said, quietly as we ate breakfast. "She always does after the second night." Of course she would. Nyla liked control. Distance wouldn't stop her from checking her work. "When she calls," I said slowly, "we can't let her suspect anything." Damien nodded. "You have to sound worse." The idea made my stomach turn, but he was right. If Nyla believed her plan was working, she wouldn't change it. So we practiced. He coached me with the unsettling confidence of someone who had watched this performance for years. "Sometimes you repeat yourself," he said gently, "and your words get slow when you're tired." "How do you know all that?" I asked. "I had to learn," he said simply, "so I'd know when you needed help." That nearly broke me. This child, this brave, brilliant child, had been protecting me while the adults around us were failing. When the phone rang that evening, my heart started pounding. I answered on the third ring. "Oh, Lucinda," Nyla said brightly. "How are things going?" I let my voice wobble. "I'm tired, dear. I can't seem to keep track of the days." There was a pause, brief but telling. "And the tea?" she asked. "You've been drinking it?" "Yes," I lied. "Every day, just like you said." Her tone softened, satisfaction slipping through her fake concern. "Good, that's very important." She asked about my appetite, my sleep, whether I'd been dizzy or confused. Each question felt like a test. I answered just enough to reassure her without going too far. "That's normal at your age," she said calmly. "Just make sure you rest. Don't go anywhere. You don't want to overdo it. In other words, don't seek help." When she hung up, my hands were shaking. "She believes it," Damien said after a moment. I looked at my grandson, realizing how much depended on the next few days. If we rushed, we could lose everything. If we waited too long, we might not get another chance. That night, as Damien went to bed, I sat alone in the quiet house and made a decision. We weren't just going to survive this week. We were going to expose her. But the proof we needed wasn't just in documents or memories. It required catching her saying the one thing she never thought anyone would hear. The evidence we needed. By the next morning, my fear had hardened into focus. If Nyla truly believed her plan was working, she wouldn't stop. She would only wait for the moment she thought everything was finished. That meant we had limited time and no room for mistakes. Over breakfast, Damien leaned closer to me and spoke in a whisper. "Grandma, we need proof that can't be explained away." He was right. Paperwork could be questioned, memories could be dismissed, even his words could be doubted by people who only saw him as a silent child. "What kind of proof?" I asked. "Her voice," he said. "She talks when she thinks no one's listening." That's when an idea began forming in my mind. Later that morning, while Damien played in the living room, I drove to the store and bought a small digital recorder. It fit easily in my palm, simple, unremarkable, and powerful enough to change everything. When I came home, I showed it to Damien. "If we do this," I said carefully, "we have to be very cautious. Your mother can never know we're recording." He nodded without hesitation. "She won't. She never thinks I notice things." That sentence carried more weight than he realized. We spent the afternoon planning. Nyla would eventually return from the cruise expecting to find me confused, weak, and compliant. If she believed that, she might speak freely, especially if she thought the worst was already behind her. "She'll want to talk about next steps," Damien said, "like where you'll live." The thought made my stomach twist, but I forced myself to stay steady. "Then that's when we record," I said carefully, "when she explains what she's been doing." We practiced again, my slurred speech, my confusion, my hesitation. It felt cruel to imitate my own decline, but Damien assured me it matched what he'd seen before. "You're doing it right," he said seriously. "She won't suspect anything." That night, after Damien went to bed, I couldn't sleep. I thought about my son, about how easily he'd accepted the idea that his mother was losing her mind, about how often he deferred to his wife's opinions. Whether he knew the truth or had chosen not to see it was something I wasn't ready to face yet. The next day, I received a call from my doctor's office confirming my appointment for blood work. I felt a rush of relief. If medications were in my system that shouldn't be there, it would confirm everything Damien had told me. When I told him, his shoulders relaxed slightly. "Then they'll have to believe us." "Yes," I said, "they will." Still, a quiet fear lingered. What if Nyla moved faster than me expected? What if she realized I wasn't drinking the tea? That evening, as the sun set, Damien sat beside me on the couch, his small hand resting on mine. "Grandma," he said softly, "if something goes wrong, promise me you'll tell the truth, even if it's hard." I squeezed his hand. "I promise, and I won't let anyone silence you again." He smiled, small but real. We had the recorder, we had the documents, we had the truth. Now all we needed was the moment she let her guard down. And when that moment finally came, it wouldn't be me who spoke first. It would be the child she never believed could speak at all. The call that confirmed everything. The phone rang just after dinner. The sound alone made my stomach tighten. Damien looked up from his toys, his eyes already alert. "It's her," he said quietly. "She always calls around this time." I nodded and reached for the phone, making sure the recorder was hidden nearby, ready but not yet turned on. This call wasn't for evidence. This call was for confirmation. I answered on the second ring. "Lucinda?" said Nyla, her voice dripping with concern. "How are you feeling tonight?" I let my words come out slow and uneven. "Oh, tired, dear. Very tired. I keep forgetting what day it is." There was a brief pause. Not worry, calculation. "I was afraid of that," she said gently. "Have you been drinking the tea regularly?" "Yes, every morning. Every night." Another pause. "That's good," she said. "Consistency really matters with things like this." Things like this. She asked about my appetite, my sleep, whether I'd felt dizzy or short of breath. Each question sounded medical, but I could hear the satisfaction beneath them, like she was checking boxes on a list. I think I slept most of the afternoon, I said. Damien had to wake me up. From across the room, Damien froze. He hadn't woken me at all, but Nyla didn't know that. That's perfectly normal, she said quickly. At your age, the body just needs more rest. She lowered her voice. You shouldn't try to do too much, especially not driving. Promise me you'll stay home. I promise, I said. The lie tasted bitter, but I swallowed it. She shifted the conversation then, casually, almost carelessly. Dean's been worried, she said. He thinks maybe when we get back, we should talk about other living arrangements, somewhere with professional care. There it was, the next step. I don't want to be a burden, I said softly. You wouldn't be, she replied too quickly, but it might be safer for everyone. When she hung up, my hands were shaking. Damien stood up and walked over to me. She's happy, he said. I can hear it in her voice. I nodded slowly. She thinks this is working. He looked up at me. That means she'll say more when she gets back. Yes, I said, and next time we record. That night, I barely slept, not from fear, but from the growing certainty that this wasn't just suspicion anymore. It was confirmation. Someone I trusted had been slowly preparing to remove me from my own life, and she believed she was almost done. But when the test results came back the next morning, they proved something even more terrifying. This plan had already been poisoning me for years. The result that changed everything. The call came early the next morning. I was standing at the kitchen sink watching Damien eat his cereal when my phone buzzed on the counter. The moment I saw my doctor's name on the screen, my chest tightened. Lucinda, Dr. Reeves said, her voice serious, we need to talk right away. I told Damien to stay in the living room and stepped into the hallway, my hand shaking as I held the phone to my ear. We ran a full panel, she continued, and the results are alarming. I closed my eyes. There are multiple medications in your system that were never prescribed to you, she said. Sedatives, sleep aids, anti-anxiety drugs. Taken together, they could cause confusion, memory loss, worse if the dosage increases. So I wasn't imagining it? I whispered. No, she said firmly. Someone has been giving these to you regularly. My legs felt weak. I leaned against the wall to steady myself. How long? I asked. Based on the levels, this has been happening for quite some time, she said, and if it had continued, the outcome could have been fatal. Fatal. The word echoed in my head long after the call ended. I returned to the kitchen where Damien was watching me closely. One look at my face and he knew. They found it, he said quietly. I nodded. Everything you said was true. He exhaled slowly, like he'd been holding his breath for years. She won't stop on her own, not now. No, I agreed, which means we have to be ready when she comes back. That afternoon, I called my lawyer. I didn't explain everything, just enough to let her know I was concerned for my safety and gathering evidence. She told me to be careful, to trust my instincts. For the first time in a long while, I did. That evening, Damien and I went over our plan one last time. I would continue acting weak and confused. He would remain silent in front of his parents. The recorder would stay hidden, ready. She thinks you don't know. That's her mistake. I looked at my grandson, this child who had carried fear and truth far longer than anyone should. She underestimated both of us, I said. As night fell, I sat by the window and watched the streetlights flicker on, knowing that somewhere out there, Nyla was still enjoying her cruise, confident that everything was going exactly as she planned. She had no idea the truth was waiting for her. And when she finally walked back through that front door, she never expected the first voice she'd hear to be his. The day they came back. The sound of tires on the driveway made my heart stop. I looked out the window and saw my son's car pull in, sunlight glinting off the windshield. Dean and Nyla were home. For a moment, fear rushed through me, but I pushed it down. This was the moment everything had been building toward. "Remember," I whispered to Damien, "nothing changes." He nodded and sat on the floor with his toys, shoulders slightly hunched, eyes downcast, the version of himself everyone expected to see. I lowered myself into the armchair and let my posture slump. When the front door opened, I forced my face into a tired, unfocused expression. "Lucinda," Nyla called out, "we're back." "I'm in here," I replied, letting my words come out slow. They stepped into the living room, bag still in hand. Nyla's eyes scanned me from head to toe. I saw it immediately, the satisfaction she tried to hide. "Oh my," she said softly, "you look exhausted." "I've been very tired," I murmured. Dean frowned. "Mom, are you feeling okay?" Before I could answer, Nyla spoke for me. "She's been declining, Dean. I could hear it in her voice on the phone." Exactly what she wanted. She sat beside me and placed a cool hand on my arm. "Have you been drinking the tea?" "Yes," I said, "just like you told me." Her lips pressed together in a small, pleased smile. "That's good," she said, "very good." Dean looked uneasy. "Maybe we should take Mom to see Dr. Reeves." Nyla shook her head. "I don't think that's enough anymore. This looks like something more serious." More serious. She was already pushing him. "I don't want to be a burden," I whispered. "You're not," Dean said quickly, "but professional care might be best for her safety." I glanced at Damien, who was still silent on the floor. Everything was unfolding exactly as we'd planned. Nyla leaned closer to me. "You should rest," she said. "You've had a very hard week." "Yes," I replied. "I feel confused." That was the moment I saw her fully relax. She believed she'd won. And just when Nyla felt most confident, when she thought the story was finished, that's when my grandson stood up. The voice she never expected. Nyla had just finished talking about next steps when Damien stood up. At first, no one noticed. He set his toy down carefully, just like he always did. Slow, controlled, silent, the way everyone expected him to be. Then he walked past me. "Damien," Nyla said distractedly, "go sit down, sweetheart." He didn't. Instead, he reached behind the bookshelf and pulled out the small recorder we had hidden days earlier. That's when Nyla froze. "Damien," Dean said, confused, "what do you have there?" My heart was pounding, but I stayed seated, letting the moment unfold exactly as we'd planned. Damien turned around and faced them. "It's a recorder," he said clearly. The room went silent. Dean stared at his son like he was seeing him for the first time. You can talk?" "Yes," Damien replied. "I always could." Nyla's face drained of color. "That's not funny," she said sharply. "You know he can't speak." "I can," Damien said again, stronger this time. "You just told me not to." The words hit her like a slap. Dean stood up slowly. "Nyla, what is he talking about?" She laughed, but it sounded wrong. Too fast, too thin. "This is ridiculous. He's confused, just like your mother." That's when I stood. For the first time since they returned, I dropped the act. "I'm not confused," I said calmly, "and I haven't been for days." Nyla spun toward me. What? I stopped drinking your tea, I continued, and suddenly I could think again. The room felt smaller, tighter. That's impossible, she said. You need rest. No, Damien said. You needed her weak. Dean looked between us, panic spreading across his face. What's going on? Damien held up the recorder. Everything you need to hear is on this. Nyla took a step back. You don't know what you're talking about. Oh, I said quietly, we do. And for the first time, she realized she wasn't in control anymore. But the moment we pressed play, the truth came out in her own words, and there was no escaping it. Her own words. The room felt unbearably quiet as Damien's thumb hovered over the recorder. Dean stared at it, then at his son, his face pale. Damien, where did that come from? Damien didn't answer him. He pressed play. At first, there was only a faint rustling sound. Then Nyla's voice filled the room, clear, calm, and unmistakable. You don't need to worry, the recording said. She won't notice a thing. At her age, confusion is expected. Dean's breath caught. Nyla lunged forward. Turn that off. Damien held the recorder out of her reach. The recording continued. As long as she drinks the tea every day, she'll get weaker. The doctor will say it's natural. People always believe paperwork. My stomach twisted hearing her words spoken back to her, stripped of their false kindness. Dean backed away from Nyla slowly. Is that you? She shook her head frantically. That's taken out of context. She needs help, real help. Another click, another clip. She won't fight it, the voice said. By the time we suggest a care facility, she won't even understand what's happening. Dean dropped into a chair like his legs had given out. I trusted you, he whispered. Nyla's composure cracked. I did this for us, she snapped, for our family. She was getting in the way. That was the moment everything changed. The mask fell. I stepped forward. You poisoned me. You silenced my grandson, and you called it care. She would have lived comfortably, she shouted. You're old. Damien flinched, but didn't back away. She's not old, he said. She's my grandma. Dean looked up at his son, tears in his eyes. I'm so sorry, he said. I didn't see it. The truth set heavy in the air, undeniable, irreversible. There was no explaining this away. But Nyla still had one last move to make, and it nearly destroyed everything before help could arrive. When she realized she'd lost. For a moment, no one moved. The evidence was out. The truth was spoken. And yet, Nyla's eyes didn't show guilt. They showed calculation. Then she ran. She lunged past Dean toward the hallway, her hand reaching into her purse. Damien, stay back, I shouted. But my grandson didn't freeze. He moved. Nyla pulled out a small bottle, the same kind I'd seen in the folder upstairs. Her hand shook as she twisted the cap. You don't understand, she said wildly. This was supposed to be quiet, clean. Dean grabbed her arm. What are you doing? She shoved him away with surprising force. Let go. If she takes one more dose, none of this matters. The room erupted into chaos. I felt fear surge through me, but also fury. She wasn't trying to escape anymore. She was trying to finish it. Before she could raise the bottle, Damien's voice cut through the panic. Mom, he said loudly, stop. She froze. Not because of the word, but because of the voice. Everyone froze. She turned slowly, staring at him like she was seeing a ghost. You can't fix this, Damien continued, his voice shaking but firm. They know now. Everyone will know. Her shoulders slumped. The bottle slipped from her hand and rolled across the floor. Dean picked it up, staring at the label with horror. "This isn't prescribed to anyone in this house." Nyla collapsed onto the couch, her fight draining away. "I was trying to protect my family." "No," I said. "You were trying to control it." Sirens sounded in the distance, not close yet, but coming. Dean had already made the call. Nyla buried her face in her hands as reality closed in around her. Damien walked over to me and took my hand. "It's over," he said softly. I squeezed his fingers. "Yes," I said, "because you were brave." The front door opened minutes later as officers stepped inside. And for the first time in years, I felt truly safe. But even after she was taken away, the consequences of her actions were only just beginning. The aftermath no one talks about. The house felt strangely empty after they took Nyla away. Not quiet, empty. The kind of silence that comes after something terrible has been exposed, when there's no pretending left to do. Dean sat at the kitchen table long after the officers left, his head in his hands. He looked older than I'd ever seen him. "I should have known," he said finally. "There were signs." "You trusted the person you loved," I replied gently. "That's not a crime." He nodded, but the guilt didn't leave his face. The days that followed blurred together. Doctors confirmed the damage the drugs had done, but also something hopeful. With time, my mind would fully recover. The fog wasn't permanent. I cried when I heard that. Damien began speaking more, slowly at first, then with growing confidence. Therapists were stunned. Specialists called it a breakthrough. I called it freedom. "He's always been this smart," I told them. "He was just scared." Dean listened this time. The investigation moved quickly. Nyla's notes, the medication, the recordings, it all painted a picture too clear to ignore. She tried to say she was overwhelmed, that she meant well, that she never intended to hurt anyone. The evidence said otherwise. One evening, Damien and I sat on the porch watching the sunset. "Grandma," he asked quietly, "do you think people will believe me now?" I turned to him and smiled. "They already do, and even if they didn't, you know the truth. That's what matters." He leaned against me, a weight that felt comforting instead of heavy. Our lives weren't back to normal, but they were honest, and that made all the difference. And just when I thought the worst was behind us, a final revelation changed how I understood my grandson's silence forever. This silence that saved my life. A few days after everything ended, when the house finally felt safe again, Damien asked me something that stopped me cold. "Grandma," he said softly, "can I tell you the real reason I stayed quiet?" I turned to him, my heart tightening. "I thought you already did," I said gently. "You were scared." He nodded. "I was, but that wasn't the whole reason." We were sitting together on the couch, evening light spilling through the window. For the first time, there was no tension in the air, just honesty. "When I was smaller," he said, "I talked once, just a little. I asked Mom why she was putting powder into your tea." My breath caught in my throat. "She smiled," he continued, his voice steady but small. "She told me some secrets are dangerous. She said if I talked again, you'd get hurt faster." Tears filled my eyes. "She said if I stayed quiet," Damien went on, "things could happen slowly, that I was helping you by not saying anything." I pulled him close, my hands trembling. "So you carried all of that," I whispered, "all by yourself?" He nodded. "I watched. I waited. I knew one day you'd need to know." "And when they left for the cruise?" I asked. "That was when she said it was time," he replied. "That's why I talked, because I didn't want to lose you." I broke then. Years of fear, confusion, and betrayal spilled out in silent tears as I held my grandson. "You were never weak," I said through my sobs. "You were protecting me." He smiled, soft, relieved. "I don't have to be quiet anymore." "No," I said firmly, "you never will again." Today, Damien speaks freely. He laughs loudly. He asks endless questions, and every single word feels like a gift. I listen to him more closely than anyone I've ever known, because sometimes silence isn't emptiness. Sometimes it's love waiting for the right moment to speak. If this story moved you, remember this. Pay attention to the quiet ones. Their silence may be holding a truth that could change everything.